Welcome, beauty, and thank you for joining us on this very special chat with Nisha Gill today. By way of introduction, I am Helen Z, and I am the author of Consciously Conceive Your Baby, The Inner Secrets to Boosting Your Fertility and Getting Pregnant, where I've been working with women and couples for a number of years to help you through your preconception phase. And what I would love to do today is take us on a journey on what is possible for conception, from conception into pregnancy, birth, and also the postpartum phase. And the best person to talk about this, I'm going to introduce you to Nisha. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Nisha. Oh, that was my children's photo frame, which I have on an altar, which are normally a part of my remembering of motherhood. Okay. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Nisha. Nisha is a birth educator, doula, and birth trauma practitioner. She also educates birth workers on birth trauma. Now, I have been to Nisha's workshops, and they are highly informative and supportive of the birth worker sector, and it is an absolute gift. Nisha is well versed in the perinatal birth and post-birth journey, which involves empowerment, choice and mitigation where birth trauma exists as well. As I said, what a gift. Let's share what insights Nisha has for helping women plan for pregnancy, birth, and the fourth trimester. Nisha, welcome.
Thank you, Helen. Such a pleasure to be here and to connect with you in this time of COVID and isolation, but still connection through this medium. Yes, you're really talking to my passion here. So there's a lot I'd love to share. I'm also mindful that we only have about 40 minutes to talk about all of this. Some of my areas of passion are around planning for baby, because there's so much that's involved in planning for a baby, especially for first-time parents, what babies need to thrive, whether people choose a hospital or home birth. There's a lot to consider there. I think you had asked me about ecstatic birth, so I'm going to speak to that because it's a topic that's close to my heart as well, and also around the fourth trimester or the postpartum period, because it's a bit that sometimes gets missed in the planning stages for birth, and I think it's vitally intrinsic to the whole process. So that's where I'm kind of wanting to pitch it, but if you have any other suggestions, I'd be happy to accommodate that as well. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. So listeners, there is a lot to cover. The 5 topics, as Nisha pointed out, are going to be planning for baby, what a baby needs to thrive, hospital versus home options, what is an ecstatic birth, and postpartum and the fourth trimester. So I'm going to give you a few moments to get a quick drink of water if you need one, pen and paper if you haven't got one already, because I'm sure you're going to want to write down some notes, even though this recording will be sent to you as well for reference. Here in Melbourne, we're both in Melbourne, and we are doing this interview, as Nisha said, during a COVID stage 2 lockdown. So it is a very wintry Melbourne's day today. So wherever you are, look around, enjoy your surroundings, know that you are fully taken care of, and I welcome you back into the seats because we have got a lot to cover. Okay, so topic 1, Nisha, is planning for baby. Now, one thing I wanted to share with the listeners is if I am looking down, I'm either going to refer to my notes to make sure that we cover everything that we've suggested will be topics of interest, as well as writing down some questions that I might have inspired by what you're sharing. Yeah. So, Nisha, planning for a baby. The most common statement you hear from women during pregnancy, when we talk about the pregnancy, is they will say birthing a healthy baby is all that matters. Like over the ages of ages, and I've got 2 children that are young adults at 23 and 26, and I know that I've said the same thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as the baby is healthy. Why is this not the case?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, to me, that statement suggests that birth is just a physical event, which it very much isn't. Having had my 2 babies, a lot older than yours, I think 34 now and 30, and my experience also in the birthing world, you know, that birth is a profound psycho-emotional, spiritual event, and that you can't just reduce it down to the physical side of things for both the mother and especially for the baby and anyone else in their realm. You know, there are sort of transformative powers that birth has. It's such a sacred rite of passage for all concerned, and you know, this can be harnessed if parents are fully present in that birthing space with a felt sense of confidence, not with fear and trauma as part of that picture. It's also a wonderful opportunity for parents to rewrite the script of who they are in the world, to solidify their own connection with one another through going to places that they would never have imagined. They would never have seen each other in such roles, and to see these strengths emerge out of what's, you know, arguably one of the most challenging moments in most people's lives, to become parents on so many levels, not just the physical, you know, the giving birth and the messages we get about how difficult that is, and I'll speak to that in a little while as well. And the mum and baby, I think, are just completely inseparable. So what mum's feeling is also going to be in the baby's field, in their body, because they're really sentient from the moment of conception, or some would argue even before that, you know, that they know if they're welcome, they know if the world is a safe place through their mother's body, through the mother's way of being in her own body. And certainly in utero, they pick up all the stress chemicals that mum might have, or otherwise, you know, the happy hormones as well, while they're in mum's womb. So birth, to my way of thinking, is such a portal, and you know, the blueprint for birth is that babies arrive in peace and with gentleness, and that requires that parents are not numbed out and fearful and dissociate and traumatized. So if all of those ingredients are there, then it's going to directly impact on how baby views the world just as soon as they emerge. And so, you know, the sooner people or couples start preparing for birth, well before conception, I would say, to some degree, then the smoother the whole transition is for all concerned. And particularly for first-time parents, it's a huge learning curve, as you might remember, Helen. I certainly do. And Nisha, so that kind of answers the question. It's really about more than a healthy baby, but there's so many other angles to preparation.
Baby, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So what is involved in a birth plan, and what are your top recommendations to consider?
In a birth plan? Well, I actually use it as I prepare couples for getting prepared for birth, as a kind of a living document where they can consider certain points around the actual birth, whether they're birthing in hospital or at home with a private midwife or however else they might choose to, that they use some of those topics they might want to at birth, such as, you know, how would they like to meet their baby? What kinds of interventions are okay, and which ones would they prefer to be consulted about and given time to consider? And there's a whole list of those to consider really in any kind of birth. And who will the support people be, etc., etc. Lots of things. What kinds of tools would they like partners or support people to, particularly support people as in midwives, doulas, obstetricians, to suggest to them during labour and birth? Do they want to be offered pain relief? Because in most settings that's automatic, in hospital settings particularly, unless you state otherwise, and that can completely influence the outcome of birth. As well as that, it's a document for refining during pregnancy, so that it's informed by the couple's own research. It's not the birth educator's slant on things, it's not the doula or the midwife's slant on things, it's their own you know, knowledge base that they take the trouble to make their own, so that it's their baby's birth and their experience, not as suggested by somebody else. And it becomes a really enriching journey in that way. But in birth itself, it's also a way to signal to the birth team that, well, they're really serious about wanting choice, and their choices being respected, that they've done their homework and they're diligent parents, and they're using this opportunity for self-development, learning, growth, and most importantly, welcoming their baby as gently as possible into the world. So yeah, lots of angles to it. Yeah,
I thank you. And what I'm getting from that very strongly is that it is a living document that can change during the course of the pregnancy, to take into consideration the setting, take into consideration how much intervention you might want up front. Things may change as you go into the actual labour, and we all get that and understand that, but at least having a framework to work around. Do you find that birth plans are followed and referred to during the course of labour? Say, let's take, for example, drug intervention. Let's keep it really simple. So a person might have that they prefer to have no drug intervention, whether it doesn't matter what setting you're in. Do you find that that is referred to, and then if things start to change, that then a woman gets an option of, does she want to now refer to a certain category of medicine to help her through the pain threshold?
Yeah, look, you know, Helen, I think it really depends on the setting, and here's where also choice of birthplace and birth team has a big impact. If you don't have continuity of care, such as a doula that you hire, or a private midwife, whether it's a hospital or home birth, or an obstetrician, then it is a bit of potluck. But from my experience as a birth doula supporting couples in hospital settings, yes, it has been followed. But it's hard also to separate the fact that I was there helping create that birth bubble as a doula. So, you know, there's almost like a double layer of, we're serious about this. You know, this is our sacred moment as we welcome a baby into the world, and we really want it to be as smooth as possible without any kind of trauma, as much as you can avoid that. So yes, it's followed, but birth of all things is such a mystery, and no one can really control to the nth degree how it will go. Baby has a say in it as well with their own neurochemistry, etc. But to have some kind of framework, I think, is better than winging it. Most certainly better than winging it, because it implies that you just follow hospital protocol and you have no real basis for deciding in the moment. And let's face it, if you're really in labor land, which is a very primal space as the birthing person, you don't want to be making those decisions. You already want to be informed about those choices prior to going into labor.
Beautiful.
And I just want to say too that partners can't be all things to the birthing person, so they can't just be left with all the decisions. I think certainly they have to still work as a team during labor, but as much as possible have those conversations about contentious issues well before birth, if they can. Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Nisha, and listeners, I have been under your healing hands for non-birth related body work in the past. And can you please share the importance for our listeners on regular prenatal body work for mother and baby?
Thanks, Helen, for that plug. Well, look, there are very many dimensions to touch. We just can never underestimate the power of touch on so many levels. So to me, it's nervous system regulation. It's melting away the aches and pains of pregnancy, if there are any. Not everyone has them, so let's not even preempt that. But also preventing injuries. You know, some people have like separation of the pubic symphysis and so forth. And so learning ways to move, then pelvic balancing so that you get baby into a favorable position for birth, and becoming really more intricately aware of your pelvic space to notice if you're holding tension there, because clearly that's not going to support an easy labor. And a whole host of other things closer to birth, getting the oxytocin flowing, so touch is well known to do that. And I might also venture into postpartum. You know, in a lot of cultures, the birthing new mother was massaged every day, if not twice a day, you know, just to help with recovery, with breastfeeding, just feeling better and present for baby and present to her own recovery. So yeah, lots of reasons to be touched in pregnancy. Body connection. A lot of us live in you know, thinking brain from our eyebrows up, as it were, and being touched just kind of is one step closer to being more in your body, which is where birth happens.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes, we forget sometimes. Eh?
We sure do. We sure do. Can we move on to our second topic, which is what a baby needs to thrive? Yeah, is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. So, you know, babies are, all human mammals are hardwired for safety and connection. And when birth goes to the blueprint, which is undisturbed, no intervention, no drugs, no other factors interfering with the smooth kind of progress of birth, but just given time and space for it to emerge the way it needs to, then conditions, you know, just the chemicals floating around in mum's bloodstream and babies are going to promote this blueprint, which is that baby arrives in their own time, within reason. You know, you still monitor things like heart rate, but not necessarily with continuous fetal monitoring. That's another whole topic. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But then baby arrives and mum and partner are not in a state of fear. They're present. The hormones, the cocktail of ecstatic hormones, as they're called in birth, prime them to be open and full of oxytocin and looking for connection and bonding and alert. And babies, you know, they're hardwired to look at human faces, to also to tune into high-pitched voices. I think we've learnt that through the ages because we naturally raise our voices, you know, in terms of pitched little ones, also with our pets sometimes. And so babies, when they emerge, if you pop them, if all's well, you know, if baby's well and the cord is long enough, pop the baby on mum's belly, they actually can crawl up like a little baby kangaroo all the way up to mum's nipple, which is also with an evolutionary sort of imperative there, becomes darker in pregnancy, very much as a landing strip, you know, so that baby finds their way to mum's nipple and latches on if the baby's given time and space and it's well enough to do that and alert. So all these things can happen, and it's called that golden hour, that time where mother and baby are never going to have this again in their life other than in pregnancy and birth, where the cocktail of hormones, ecstatic hormones, especially oxytocin, is at its maximum. And this really is favorable for bonding, as you can imagine. And that ensures baby's survival if we look at it in a primal way, you know, it's a very primal time for mother and baby.
I love that essence of the golden hour.
Yeah.
Just taking a moment to really drink that in for all our listeners, knowing that there's an opportunity of having that golden hour, which is nature's way of immersing and embodying you all, mother, baby, and actually even father, which I'll talk about in a moment. Just alerted me to something. To have that moment of extreme bonding, which takes us right through to those first few years of life, about what the role is and the connection between mother, baby, and if the father is available for the bonding unit between the three to make that family.
Yeah.
As you were talking, Nisha, I remember when I was researching for the book, I found information that the oxytocin levels in a man's brain, in a father's brain at time of birth, is as high, it floods the brain body activity as much as a mother in the same amounts. And that literally, I was blown away with that, because it really makes sense that oxytocin, being the bonding hormone, means that this is how families start to thrive. This is what used to be the norm for a very, very long time before we started introducing more of our modern family scenarios that we have of today. And everything is welcome. I'm not saying one's better or more superior than the other, but the fact that a father's brain is just as much oxytocin, it's like, what a beautiful thing to know, is that in that moment, that bonding moment happens between a family unit, if that's what is available.
Yeah, and I have to say, Helen, as a birth doula, and also speaking with a lot of my birthwork colleagues, it's quite an addictive space to be in. As you can imagine, no one wants to leave the birthing space if things go well and there's a lot of oxytocin flooding, you know, the airwaves in that space. Yeah, it's palpable, oxytocin in the space.
Nisha, in my conversations with you and in the past, you've referenced the symbiotic relationship called Mamamoto.
Mama Toto.
Please, I would love for you to share Mama Toto with our listeners as well. I feel it's a beautiful opportunity for education.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I love talking about this. Well, once again, that whole primal connection, but Mama Toto is a word in Swahili, which is an African language, which essentially is saying that mother and baby are inseparable. They're one entity. And when you consider that, pardon me, babies come from this space in utero to the outside world, it's a huge journey, but and quite dramatic. The differences from being in utero to outside are dramatic. And then to is that position, baby has to kind of pretty much live on mother. That's the ideal. They say in the first few weeks, baby wear particularly, excuse me a moment, and there's good reason for that. You look at the animal world, all our mammalian friends, they do that. And it just ensures bonding, it ensures good feeding. The oxytocin flows through touch for mum, which means that breast milk is more likely to flow easily if they're not kind of being a hunter-gatherer in that time. They're actually being still and getting to know baby through that very primal sense. So touch to me and olfaction, a sense of smell, are very primal, more so than hearing and vision and all those other senses to me anyway. And that's where the bonds start to form on a very subliminal level. And symbiotic also in the way that if mum's not okay, baby's not going to be okay. If baby's not okay, mum's not going to be okay. So they both need each other to thrive in that space. And this is also called co-regulation. So we talk about a nervous system level, which is also very primal, that they both tune each other's nervous systems, if you like, regulate each other through their settled presence. So if mum's settled, baby's more likely to be settled. Baby's not crying and colicky, mum's more likely to be settled. So you can see how it's so entwined and inseparable, but also to say all the people in their realm, including partners, including other children, are going to also be impacted. So the whole family is co-regulating. And in my work in birth trauma, when I work with a mother, I know empirically that I'm working with the whole family, and it's really important that those mums, parents seek early help, because it's really a stitch in time saves 9 for the whole family. It's not just about them. They're not being selfish or silly to even seek help, and that a very busy time of their lives. So I'm veering into another topic here, but you know where I'm coming from there. Yeah.
It still very much touches on, for a baby to thrive, when things aren't quite right, like in birth trauma, it doesn't mean it's done and dusted. It means that there's still an opportunity to rectify a course of events. And the sooner, what I'm hearing is the sooner that a family unit reaches out for help, the better off the mother-baby unit will be in mitigating that. And that actually is all about a baby thriving. So, yeah.
Well, in trauma, there's body memory. So the work I do, I see people with early trauma, and that can set up lifelong patterns, Helen, of unwellness on a physical and a psycho-emotional level. So they're hard to tease apart, but very much, early trauma is kind of, it sort of sticks, that early imprint sticks. Are hardwired for threat rather than for things to thrive and go in a positive direction. So it's really important to know that little piece, but it's a huge piece. Actually, it's a huge piece, as we're discovering with neuroscience these days.
Yeah. Lovely. Shall we move on to how women and couples can prepare between a hospital, choices between a hospital and a home birth setting. Talking about birth plans. I know that home births now are a lot more available to many people and in a lot different scenarios as well and setups. What questions can one ask themselves about what is best for them? And what questions can one ask of the birth team to ensure there is empowerment in choices and option within their setting?
Yeah, look, there's a lot to talk about in this realm. And I think the sooner that decision is made, and so preconception is a good time to research this topic. The earlier they establish place of birth and the kind of birth team they want, whether it's a private midwife in a hospital or home birth, a doula, an obstetrician, or public hospital where it is a little bit more random unless you get into maternity group practice. There's a little bit more continuity of care. My bias is continuity of care, whatever your final choice is going to most likely support you with the kind of birth that you would like to experience, because I mean it stands to reason people get to know you more deeply and understand your needs and preempt them, and there's some kind of, you know, connection that's developed with the birth team and the birthing person and the family, so things are a bit more tailored and catered for, whereas if you're relying on the potluck midwife to be on your side in labour, that's leaving things a little bit to chance. I mean, that's my bias. It sometimes boils down to money, but I'll also say, you know, hold on, people spend a lot of money on fancy furniture for baby or clothes or toys even before they arrive, prams and it goes on, whereas that money could be so well spent on a birth doula for continuity of support. And doulas, the special role that they play, I rarely work as a doula now, but it's been a profound journey of learning through having supported many couples through birth, is that they're there solely for the couple, the whole family, in a psycho-emotional way for support, you know, so they help create that birth bubble. So that's my little plug for doulas, because they're really worth their weight in gold to my way of thinking. But some of the questions, so I guess, you know, what is your birth vision? You know, what, as a couple, you know, how aligned are you with each other around that birth vision as well? Has to be ironed out early, because if they're home birth and the other not, and then there's this doubt that's kind of seeded, you know, in the birthing person or vice versa.
So, Nisha, what is very evident to me and for our listeners is to invest the time and the resources predominantly for having the continual care that is needed, irrespective of if you're choosing a hospital or a home birth setting. And that it is quite a personalised journey, and it's hard to go through everything in one session. And I believe that you do have a birth ready guide to share with our listeners. Would you like to talk about that now?
Yes. So, you know, there's a lot of soul searching to do about birth readiness and being ready to parent a young baby. And so I've put together for the clients that I see for birth preparation in a tailored kind of way, a guide where they've got some trigger questions where they can find a quiet place to reflect upon where they're at in that preparation journey. So they're quite deep questions to consider, And I have it available as a resource on my website under the resources section. So that's something that your listeners could access if they wish, at no cost, of course. And yeah, I think, that part of the preparation can get left off if you just do your own reading or own, video watching in preparation for birth, or certain some institution-based birth preparation classes would not dig that deep. So I think it's just worth mentioning that is available.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And listeners, don't worry, at the end of this, we'll share Nisha's web details and how to access this information. So let's talk about an ecstatic birth. And may I share with you, Nisha, as well as the viewers, what the listeners, what I feel was just my mini ecstatic birth moment with my firstborn 26 years ago. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. I'm dying to hear.
I had a big bubba. He was 9 pound 9, which is like 4.36 kilos. And being the first time birthing, I did not know what to expect. I did not have as many resources as what are available right now, or what I thought was not available to me. And being a very big circumference head as well, at 36 centimeters, coming through the canal was taking quite a while. And I remember, even to help me on my journey, there was a mirror to inspire me to actually see that he's coming. But what was happening with every contraction is it comes out a little bit and goes back in, comes out and goes back in. And then what I'd realized in that pain threshold, there was also a pleasure threshold that I was experiencing. And it was years later that I started to recall, when I was having a conversation in a group full of other women, that he must have been rubbing on my G-spot. And so that continuous in and out was basically a beautiful, beautiful pleasure response that I was receiving, which was the ecstatic hormones that I think were coursing through my body through my pain threshold as well. So would you say that's it? Would you say that I had an ecstatic birth moment, ecstasy moment in that?
Yeah, well, look, they're terms, but my definition of ecstatic and what you describe is really the orgasmic end of ecstatic birth. So they're kind of on a continuum, and I see, yes, definitely, the cocktail of hormones is going to empt all of this prime our bodies for this. But yeah, also consider that, that the anatomy for birth it's the same as for lovemaking, and all those places can be accessed as baby's head is descending, or whole body really pressing against some of those places, including clitoris, which is more embedded than not in our female bodies. So and G-spot and cervix also has deep pleasure potential. So all of these places can be accessed through birth. But I think ecstatic to me describes more that amazing heart-opening, altered state kind of, so more of an emotional, energetic component, whereas orgasmic to me more the physical pleasure and also energetic. So you can see they're kind of on a continuum, and definitely women can access that. Most need to prepare their bodies for that possibility to kind of unhook from old ways of being. But in your case, it happens spontaneously, possibly because you might have already been very much in touch with your own body and your sexuality and your pleasure as a young mother. So that's, nice to hear.
Well, I thought I'd share a little bit up close and personal in my personal experience. Nisha, tell me, I know that through your work, you offer specialized movement, breath, and vocalization practices as part of creating an ecstatic birth experience. Can you talk to that about what is possible for women using?
Yeah. I will say there's no guarantees in birth. There's never any guarantees, but the sooner women embark on these kinds of journeys, the more likely they'll head in that direction. So I teach embodiment practices called Primal Mama, specially geared for pregnant women, to get them more into their body, into their pleasure, to really honor and celebrate that supreme, intelligent exquisiteness of their female bodies. Like, I mean, they're amazing, amazing portals, you know, to other realms, if nothing else, other than bringing a whole human into the world. And the aim is to have that really deeply felt sense of confidence, not just what you get through understanding the psychology and the politics and the physiology of birth, but deeply felt sense of being ready to meet the intensity of birth through your body, not through your brain, but through your body. And the practices are based on tantric, Taoist, women's mysteries. I trained as an ecstatic birth practitioner, and so some of my my approach is also based on that. Birth education and a whole host of other things I've worked and trained in over the years. So bringing that into classes where women get into this really primal state and feel safe to surrender into that primal aspect of themselves, just as they're pregnant and practice for birth. So it's a kind of birth rehearsal, and the more they do it, the more easily it comes. So things like breath and vocalization and moving from the inside out are a big part of all of that, but also tuning into what are your inner boundaries, your not the good girl boundaries, but the primal cave woman boundaries, the fierce but soft side of who you are as a mother, really tuning into that and developing that which we need to do for birth and early parenting, very much so. Yeah, so, you know, I've watched women kind of start pregnancy with a whimper and birth their babies with a roar, and it is just magic to see that transformation in a woman, like just rewrite her whole life story through birth. It's really quite magical.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
The conversation has been utterly enlightening, and before we run out of time, I would love to talk about the postpartum phase and what is now known as the fourth trimester, which I feel is a brilliant way of rewriting the birth language and to include that first part as being part of the fourth trimester. Anything that you care to share about postpartum advice, please?
Yeah, so big thing is that, you know, birth is huge, no matter what our linear thinking brains want us to believe, and the productivity script that's out there in the world, that we're not worthy unless we're being productive and earning a living. That has to be completely thrown out the window to be nurturing our babies in the best possible way. This is my bias, so take it or leave it. Again, think primal, what does the baby need?
Yeah, and add to that so that we can take a photo of being in skinny jeans with, you know, a top, and you know, I've seen that over the years of working in this field for a long time, and not everybody's going to be able to do that, but there certainly is this body image as well as the power on image of what a woman is very, very powerful post-birth, but that doesn't mean that it potentially is running corporations and I won't even, I'll just touch on that. I'll pass it back to you. Yeah.
So, you know, birth changes the structure of our brains, our female brains. It's called baby brain, and it's it's sort of often described in disparaging ways, but it's actually so well designed in that evolutionary sense for us to really be primed to meet our babies and help them thrive through our presence. So we tend to not be as much in linear time. When I've visited my clients postpartum, they're still in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. I apologize. I'm actually so pleased that they've thrown out the clock and just been there for their baby. There's a saying, 40 days for 40 years. So if a mother doesn't honor this time and actually go slow and look after her body, this huge transition she's been through, if she doesn't do that, then she is likely to struggle with health issues for the next 40 years in some form or other. They may not crop up immediately, but bodies will take a toll if mothers don't, kind of follow that very biological need to rest and to be just with baby, skin to skin, getting to know them, getting to understand their language, co-regulating with them, bonding, breastfeeding, nourishing them. And then, there's so many elements to this. I know myself as a strong, independent woman that I learned this the hard way. I didn't know how to ask for what I really need time in our lives, that we have to be open to receiving, pardon me, and not expecting that one-on-one reciprocation, that you have to run out and then, babysit your friend's baby or cook them a meal just because they've done that for you. There'll be other times. What goes around comes around. I do know that for a fact. And so being able to be humble and vulnerable and know that that's actually courageous. That's not being weak. And if not for yourself, then at least for your baby, to be able to be still and not dictated to by the outside world, because the only guide should be, how's baby and how are you? They're the two vital pieces here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And lastly, I would love to talk to the listeners about the closing of the bone ceremony, which I feel is glorious in making a comeback. And there might be some viewers that don't know about the closing of the bone ceremony. So can you briefly touch on that before we have to wind it up?
Yeah, so this is a sacred ritual that originated in South and Central America, places like Mexico, where over the ages, postpartum or post any significant life transition journey, such as grief and loss, such as, a health challenge, that a person might be offered this, whether male or female, actually. And so it's a kind of a space where the person lies down and their joints are kind of gently drawn together with shawls. It can be done in community, it can be done one-on-one, which is typically what happens here in Australia, with a birth worker practitioner who's trained in this. And it's a way to have some sense of closure, celebration, and honouring of that significant journey in the person's life. It's a kind of physical, energetic, psycho-emotional, spiritual, whatever levels you want to tune into. It's just a beautiful way to have some sense of, well, this part of my life is kind of done, and I'm taking all the wisdom and learning from it, and the vulnerabilities as well, and then moving forward from there. And it's quite amazing how when I've shared this with some of the women I've worked with, that the shifts can be really profound for them, just that sense of being witnessed and held in such a sacred space as they move forward in their lives. So, and even with trauma, I've seen that, create significant shifts for some people. So, yeah, just one more way of honoring that beautiful, beautiful time of pregnancy, birth, and early parenting.
Absolutely precious. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom and all the work that you've done in the modalities to bring such a holistic approach into the mother, baby, and family unit. I, for one, just again want to thank you for even reading and being a part of the book where you've endorsed it with a beautiful testimonial. And I just love the way the preconception phase and honouring and conscious conception all the way through to conscious pregnancy and parenting is a beautiful hand-in-hand approach that we take in the work that we do. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
My pleasure, Helen. Thank you so much for all the work you do in the world. It's so amazing to be able to tune into someone so aligned. And yeah, I've always loved a connection in person, but also as birth professionals. It's been a wonderful journey together, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you today as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you too. And for our viewers, Nisha has already spoken about a birth ready guide that can be a resource. At the end of this video, either through the email or through the link, you can actually get in contact with Nisha. There will also be her email address and her website to share with you. So anything else, Nisha, that you would like to share before we close off?
No, just to really know that this is such a precious once in a lifetime opportunity, or maybe 2 or 3 or 5 times in a lifetime if you have several babies, but to make the most of it for all of your sakes. You know, life is precious, and it's just drilling down. There's nothing like birth to drill down to what's really important to you as a family. Make the most of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing where these conversations spark up in the future for our viewers in being able to reach out to you as well. So big gratitude to you, Nisha. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Bye.